Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina wa Maulana Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahabatihi ajma'een. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuhu. Firstly, would like to warmly welcome you all to this first night of Ramadan. We have now entered the blessed month, a month which contains numerous events of significance and importance in the history of our ummah. Before I go any further, I should just make out that if there's any announcements that the college has to make, apparently there's housekeeping rules that we have to have, and they will be electronically issued to you on the sidebar, which I think is to your right-hand side when you view the screen, if I'm not mistaken. Alhamdulillah. So what we intend to do in this sort of series of reminders is perhaps just spend 10 to 15 minutes every weeknight evening and discuss some of the most beautiful and powerful concepts that form the paradigm of our faith from the wonderful book by Al-Imam Al-Nawawi, a compilation of some 2,000 hadith, wherein he speaks, or wherein he collects, I should say, a hadith which remind us of these paradigms, such as patience and such as intentions and such as tawakkul and shukr and taqwa and yaqeen and how we can do good deeds. So it's really a garden of the righteous people. So alhamdulillah, this is our first night, and we will spend just a few moments speaking about the hadith of intentions, or what's ordinarily referred to as the hadith of intentions. Opinion has it here in relation to the month of Ramadan, before we speak about intentions, that the word Ramadan is derived from the word Ramba, which is a type of rain that falls just before the autumn. And this rain, it serves to wash away and remove the dust and dirt and impurities that had gathered over the summer months. And so likewise, Ramadan is almost in that sense a type of rain. It's the type of rain that if we observe Ramadan properly, the dust and impurities and perhaps sins which have gathered throughout the year, it's just going to really wash them all away, and again leave us with purified hearts, that we can begin the journey within the remainder of the year with renewed intentions and a renewed sense of purity. Imam al-Bukhari, the great Al-Imam al-Bukhari, he begins his collection of hadith with a chapter titled Kitab Bad il-Wahi, the book about the beginning of revelation. But what's really noteworthy is that the first hadith itself is not about the beginning of revelation. What we find instead is the hadith which is narrated by Sayyiduna Umar radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, which again, as I mentioned, is the hadith of intentions. Innamal a'malu, that the Prophet alayhi salam said, Innamal a'malu bin niyat, wa innama likulli imri'in ma nawa. فمن كانت هجرته إلى الله ورسوله فهجرته إلى الله ورسوله ومن كانت هجرته لدنيا يصيبها أو امرأة ينكحها فهجرته إلى ما هاجر إليه أو كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم. This hadith is narrated by both Al-Imam Al-Bukhari and Al-Imam Muslim. What's really interesting then is that why did Imam Bukhari begin his collection with? That's the question that we have. What would motivate him to begin his collection with this hadith? And I want to go through 5 points and just reflect on those points as starting places that we can, perhaps spend the rest of Ramadan thinking about the importance of these axiomatic statements that we hear from the Prophet alayhi salam, because as we know, his Jawami'ul Kalim, his speech is such that he has this miraculous ability to be able to use few words but to convey an ocean of meanings. And so what we see, first and foremost, that this hadith is axiomatic. It's a principle. This hadith serves to remind us, or should be at the forefront of anything that we do. It should be at the forefront of our minds before we are about to bring ourselves to do anything. Imam al-Bukhari is about to embark on a collection like no other collection. And so it makes sense and it's readily apparent why he'd want to place this hadith of such importance right at the beginning. About intentions. What is it that I'm here to do? I'm here to collect the words of the Prophet ﷺ. The second reflection I'd like to think about is, look at the comportment we are taught through the gentleness of language that is being used in this hadith. So for instance, we see that the Prophet ﷺ mentions innamal a'malu bin niyat, that actions are only by intentions, that we get the credit for what we intend. And then we're told that whosoever's hijrah is for the sake of Allah and His Messenger, alayhi salam, then his hijrah is for Allah and His Messenger. And whosoever's hijrah was for some worldly affair, فَمَنْ كَانَتْ هِجْرَتُهُ وَمَنْ كَانَتْ هِجْرَتُهُ لِدُنْيَا, whosoever's hijrah was for a worldly affair, or for a woman he wanted to marry, أو امرأة ينكحها, فهجرته إلى ما هاجر إليه. Look at the softness in which the Prophet ﷺ mentions this. Whereas the first time the Prophet ﷺ mentions whosoever his hijrah or her hijrah is for Allah and His Messenger, their hijrah is for Allah and His Messenger. But whosoever's hijrah is for the dunya, or maybe because he wants to marry a woman, then his hijrah is for whatever he intends to make hijrah for. Doesn't repeat what it is that they're making hijrah for. It's a beautiful way of expressing something which may not be entirely liked, or something which may be disliked, and something which may not form the comportment of us having to mention these things more than once, that the Prophet ﷺ doesn't need to mention a second time. He says, whosoever's hijrah is for Allah and His Messenger, his hijrah is for Allah and His Messenger. And whosoever's hijrah is for the dunya, or for marrying a particular woman, then his hijrah is for whatever he makes his hijrah for. Again, something to think about for us, insofar as when we speak about things which may be sometimes perhaps not the best things to speak about or mention, there's a beautiful way of how we can mention them, almost as if we're not mentioning them, but in some euphemistic sense. Thirdly, we can understand that the idea of an intention itself. We have an intention in a fiqh sense, where an act is operationalized in sacred law. That I want to stand up to pray, and I make an intention to pray. And there are certain things that we must mention and bring to mind before we're about to pray. Or the same thing for Ramadan. We make an intention either at the beginning of the month, or at the beginning of at the night prior to each fast. Now, that's just to get the sacred law aspect of it operationalized. But we also have an intention as to why we are actually doing something. The things that we're doing, why are we in fact even doing them? A deeper intention. This intention forms the basis of the acts insofar as they are accepted or not. And so it's no surprise that we hear from the pious that they say, تَعَلَّمُوا النِّيَّةِ, that learn to actually intend, that we should make a habit to look at what it is that we're trying to do, and why, and for whom. So an intention can be understood as having two aspects. An aspect whereby we operationalize what we're trying to do in fiqh, in sacred law, and an intention in terms of what is it that why are we actually here? For whom are we doing this? And what's beautiful about this book, Riyadus Salihin, this book is a journey through trying to understand and trying to align and make our intentions vertical. That's what we're constantly reminded by Imam an-Nawawi in this beautiful collection. The fourth point I'd like to maybe just reflect on here is about paradigms and about worldviews. Our lives should be such that we are vertically aligned to the heavens, not horizontally, aligned to the more base aspects of the world. That if we look at this hadith, and if we understand this hadith axiomatically as a principle, then it must be understood in the sense that the hijrah, in addition to the hijrah that was undertaken by the companions, radiallahu ta'ala anhum, which was a moment in history, space-time, that the hijrah that's being referred to here, if the hadith indeed as it is a principle, it must be beyond spatio-temporal boundaries. It must transcend any attempt to localize it. It's not making a hijrah from point A, physical point A, to physical point B. In fact, it's asking us to make a hijrah of our minds, a hijrah of our being, a hijrah of one paradigm, or from one paradigm, a paradigm of materialism, of the base desires of this world, to a paradigm or reality of Allah and His Messenger, alayhi salam, i.e., towards Islam. We have to want to live in that paradigm. That's why we find it difficult sometimes when it may be the case that we attend lessons or we attend reminders, but what we're really doing is we're jumping into our car, and what we're doing is we're going from one paradigm, is perhaps the one that we're living in right now, which is the dunya world-based paradigm, and we're making an evening's journey to paradigm B, which is the paradigm of Allah and His Messenger, alayhi salam. And then once we're finished, we get into the car and we come back to the first paradigm. That's why we see that sometimes we wonder, why is change not taking place? Because we're refusing to live in a paradigm that we should actually be in. We should be living in a paradigm of Allah and His Messenger, alayhi salam, and looking at the paradigm of the dunya, as opposed to the other way, which is that we live in a paradigm of the dunya and we tend to want to look out toward the paradigm of Allah and His Messenger and sort of dip into it now and then keep coming out, dip into it and keep coming out. You see, in the former, in the world-based paradigm, there's problems. If we make mistakes, we think we're doomed. In the paradigm of Allah and His Messenger, there's no such thing. If we slip, Allah is there. If we make mistakes and we turn to Allah, He forgives us. And if we truly come back to Allah, He not only forgives us, but He makes all of our sins into good deeds. Only Allah can do that. The world-based paradigm is restrictive. It confines us. It's molded and shaped by purely phenomenal knowledge. That which we can see or that which we can touch is a paradigm of the senses. And if we overindulge our senses, it can lead one to distraction and possible destruction. The paradigm of Allah and His Messenger, alayhi salam, is so vast. It transcends empirical concerns and goes directly to one's heart. And when the heart indulges in the remembrance of Allah, that's it. That's the garden of the righteous people. And so this is where we then come to the fifth point and our final point for this evening, which is something that Sheikh Abdul Hakim will inshallah speak about in his weeknight lectures, the idea of halwa. That halwa in Arabic refers to a religious seclusion. But if we look at the meaning of the word halwa, it's really about emptying ourselves out. What's the emptying that we're doing? We're emptying ourselves out of the dunya, out of ourselves. We're voiding the dunya from ourselves. We're taking it out. That's khalwa in terms of its base meaning in language. And what's really interesting is that how it stands in juxtaposition with a word, mala'a, which is to fill oneself up with something. And the highest gathering in paradise is al-mala'ul a'la, the highest gathering. And mala'a, literally the place that you're going to be filled. But we can only be filled if we come empty. The nature of the world is that it barely allows us to get empty. We're not even hungry and we want to eat. Our desires barely have been seen to that we want the next thing. That's not really how Muslims have historically understood their journey to Allah. And so to fit into this paradigm that we're speaking about, we need to really begin to adopt frames which speak of the reality of this deen. But how are we meant to do that? Let's take an example here. Our frames are created by thoughts in our mind. We can only think about things that we know. If I were to bring a child into the room and explain certain things about an adult's world, it wouldn't understand what I'm speaking about. Why? Because it's never seen or heard, or it doesn't understand those things. It doesn't have the frames with which to think. In other words, the material of thought is absent for this child. Similarly, if we want to live in a paradigm and think in terms that reflect our deen, then we need the material to be able to think about that. And that material must come from somewhere. If I were to give someone an instruction to say, can you make me a table? And then they say, okay, can I have some material? And I give them some wood, and then they say, fine, but I say, can you make me a metal table? How can they make me a metal table from wood? The material isn't correct. How can we think about Allah and His Messenger alayhi salam if we don't have the material in our mind to think about them? So clearly and evidently, this material needs to be had from somewhere. And that can only be the case if we make a conscious decision to want to live in that paradigm that we refer to as Allah and His Messenger, or as alayhi salam, or as Al-Imam An-Nawawi refers to it as the garden, the meadows of the righteous. These are the meadows that we want to be in. These are the frames and the material that we want to be in our minds, so we can think about these ideas, that we can truly understand our purpose and how we're meant to journey in this world. And ultimately, life is, as Sheikh Abdul Hakim has said many times before, Allah yahfaduhu, that life is really a journey in which we're trying to lessen our intentions until we can get to the point that our intentions become one, which ultimately reflects the Tawheed, which is a central part of our faith. Alhamdulillah, thank you all for joining us this evening. The purpose of these reminders is just to spend a few moments reflecting on various chapters from the book Riyadh al-Salihin. And tomorrow we will again pick another topic and hopefully journey together in this month of Ramadan, and try to, like I said, gaze upon these people at the very least, and hope in our hearts that we can begin our journey to spend more permanent time in these gardens of the righteous. Alhamdulillah. I don't know if we actually ordinarily take questions. I'm happy to, for the college to, we have our people at the college. I'm just going to see questions that come up, and maybe we can spend just a few moments. There's a question, walaikum salam, about books that we can read. Ramadan is a month of the Qur'an. Our relationship with the Qur'an, our first focus should be how many completions of the Qur'an that we can do, to read the Qur'an with reflection. It contains everything that we need to know. And so this is a month of focusing really on the Qur'an. And if you want to, let's say, because tabarakallah, everyone is spending so much time now at home, a time of seclusion, a time of emptying ourselves out. We're being forced into seclusion, which in Ramadan is a good thing. That perhaps we can spend some time reading seerah, because ultimately the Prophet alayhi salam, as Sayyidah Aisha radiyallahu ta'ala anha reminds us, kana khuluquhu al-Qur'an. Kana al-Qur'an yamshi. He was the walking Qur'an. His character was the Qur'an. So if we need an explanation and an understanding of what the Qur'an is trying to teach us, then that's there in his noble and blessed life. Alhamdulillah. 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 There's just a question here about how does one develop insight to know that their intentions are right, from our brother Mudassar, all the way from the Midlands. Allah bless you. Life is about journeying to make sure that our intentions are constantly checked. It's something which we hope that the cumulative aspect of our life, that when we're standing in front of Allah, we can look back and realize that, yeah, our intentions, we worked hard on them. And a way to keep a way to understand how those intentions might be aligned is to constantly take yourselves to account. And that's one of the chapters, in fact, in this book, which is Babul Muraqabah, to be vigilant, to watch over yourselves, and the subtlety of our own mind and how we may or may not want things, just to be aware of that. So really the second aspect of our intentions, which is the vertical engagement of our intentions, and to see that we're doing it purely for the sake of Allah, something which we work on every single day. It's the greater jihad, as the Imams have reminded us in many places. Is this a collection of hadith? Yes, it's a collection of hadith. It's referred to and known as Riyadus Salihin, the garden of the righteous, or the meadows of the righteous. It contains somewhere in the region of 2,000 hadith, and all of the hadith pretty much are taken from Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, and they are hadith which are really trying to align our hearts to Allah and that paradigm that we're speaking about. Is there a specific seerah book that you can recommend? I would, in the English language, I think a lot more has become available more recently. So I would say one book that I really benefited from was the seerah written by Martin Lings, and it has a beautiful set of lectures that accompany it by Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, Allah yahfadhuhu, which I heard in the 90s and completely changed my life. So you can read that book and follow the lectures that are given by Sheikh Hamza Yusuf. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Anyone who has any health concerns, the best thing to do is speak to and get medical advice. And then you can take it to a scholar to answer the question about whether you should fast or not. But primarily, you should seek medical advice on that. Alhamdulillah. It's 5 a.m. and it's suhoor time here. Allah bless you all. May you have a blessed Ramadan there in Malaysia. Unfortunately, I'm not really aware of English translations of Riyadus Salihin. If anyone knows any good translations, please do go ahead and post them. We have this tendency of acting without having any intention, really mindlessly. Is there any strategy you can suggest? I mean, just to remind ourselves of the fact that every major collection of hadith and any class of knowledge always begins with the hadith of intentions. It shows us the primacy, the centrality of intending to do things for the sake of Allah, and to really reflect. And as you quite rightly say, how much of our life is just on autopilot? We don't even think, and our hand is extended for the coffee, hand is extended for the donut, or whatever it may be. We're just on autopilot. We don't think. So having an intention is almost linked to, are we even thinking about things? So the more reflective we've become, the more thoughtful we become about things, the more we can hopefully engage our intentions at a more constant level. So yeah, I think there's a beautiful symmetry there of just take a step back, reflect, be thoughtful on things that you do, and then that will accompany itself with having a habit then of checking our intentions. And a lot of our life and a lot of our time should be spent really thinking about what our intentions are, whatever we may be doing. Alhamdulillah. I think Sheikh Hamza Yusuf's lectures are online. I mean, the internet is a strange thing, and I'm sure in some enlightened corner that we can find those particular classes, inshallah. MashaAllah, our brothers from Germany, marhaba, most welcome. Does the intention to fast have to be verbal every night? There's a difference in fiqh here between the different schools. According to the Shafi'i school, you must make an intention at the beginning of every night. And according to the Maliki school, making the intention at the beginning of the month is enough. So I'd recommend that you speak to your local scholars about that, and whoever your teachers are, to follow what they say. Reading the direct translation, the solution to that is to find qualified scholars and teachers, and to sit with them and to listen to what they have to say about the Quran. That's how those who may not know Arabic, and a translation does serve a purpose, of course it does, but if you don't know Arabic, then at least you can engage with a scholar. And one of the things that we really must be doing in the West, and or whichever part of the world that you're joining us from. And the reason why I mentioned the West, because we perhaps have it less so here, is have weekly in-person gatherings where we can revive the beautiful reminders that we have. When I used to live in Syria and Damascus, one of the first things that I noticed there when I moved there was every person had at the very least one class a week that they attended. And when I mean class, I mean these gatherings were just absolutely full of people, men, women, children, young, elderly. Um, Thousands of people would gather in different masajid, different places, and it was a given that they would attend these gatherings as reminders. So we're sort of void of those a little bit in the West, and I think we have to, and we have a lot of things online, but we should set up physical infrastructures that we can have these gatherings of and reminders that people can come as families and benefit from these reminders. Alhamdulillah. Thank you for your question. This is the final question, inshallah. Okay, I'm told final question. What? Let's have a look. Um, so there's a question about Imam Nawawi's from our brother Aftab and his background, his motives on the work of Hadith. So there are, as you'd imagine in Arabic, many resources available for such to have recourse to. In English, we're a little bit more limited. But I know, for instance, Sheikh Nuh Hamim Kella, Allah yahfaduhu, in his Reliance of the Traveler, the translation of the fiqh work, he has a number of appendices where he mentions brief biographies of the great people and the great scholars and the great imams. So that's one place. Also, he has a translation of one of Imam an-Nawawi's works, and in the introduction to that particular translation, he has a little bit about the biography of Imam an-Nawawi. And generally, I think it's a really interesting and important question. Why? Because we need to know about our tradition, and one of the ways that we can know about our tradition is knowing about the great scholars and the imams that have come in our history. And if we don't have works about them, then we should make efforts to bring those works about into the English language, inshallah. So alhamdulillah, we'll pause here. Thank you so much for joining us. It's a great pleasure to see you from all different parts of the world. And inshallah, we look forward to joining you tomorrow at the same time, 9:30 p.m. UK time, which is various times around the world. Off the top of my head, I can't actually remember, but inshallah, we look forward to seeing you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuhu.